My name is Jake. I am 62 years old, and the day I buried my wife of 40 years, I stood alone in the rain. Not alone because I had no family, but alone because grief reveals distance more clearly than death does. The woman who built my life. Her name was Margaret. Maggie to me. She had a laugh that filled rooms and a patience that built homes. We met when we were 20, two stubborn kids with no money and too many dreams. I worked construction. She worked part-time at the public library, where she would sneak old novels into my lunchbox with little notes inside. "Build something that lasts," she once wrote. I didn't know then that she meant more than houses. We saved for 7 years to buy our small blue house on Maple Street. It had peeling paint and crooked shutters, but when Margaret stood in the doorway with her hands on her hips, she smiled like we had just bought a castle. "This," she said, "is where we'll grow old." And we did. We raised 3 children in that house, Mark, Susan, and Daniel. I can still see muddy footprints across the hallway, hear laughter bouncing off kitchen tiles, smell Margaret's cinnamon rolls baking on Sunday mornings. That house was never just wood and brick. It was birthdays, apologies, late-night talks, forgiveness. It was love in physical form. The drift. Children don't leave all at once. They drift. First it's college, then careers, then bigger houses in busier cities, phone calls shorten, holidays become negotiations, visits turn into "we'll try." Margaret noticed before I did. "They're moving forward," I said once. "They're moving away," she replied quietly. When she got sick, they visited more often, but even then I could see it, the discomfort, the way they checked their phones, the way they discussed work in hushed tones near hospital doors. Margaret held my hand one night when the machines hummed steadily beside her. "If something happens to me," she whispered, her voice thin but steady, "don't let them rush you." "Rush me about what?" I asked. "Anything." She knew. She always knew. The funeral. The pastor spoke of devotion, partnership, eternal rest. I barely heard him. All I saw was the casket. 40 years reduced to a polished box and a patch of open ground. Mark stood beneath the canopy, dry. Susan dabbed her eyes carefully. Daniel stared at his shoes. None of them came to stand beside me when I stepped closer to the grave. So I stood alone. Rain washed over my face, mixing with tears I didn't try to hide. When the final shovel of dirt fell, something inside my chest felt permanently altered, as if part of the structure of my life had collapsed. I touched the wet earth. "I'll be okay, Maggie," I whispered. But the truth is, I didn't know who I was without her. The silence of the house. That night, Maple Street felt different. The house creaked the same way, the refrigerator hummed, the hallway clock ticked steadily, but her absence filled every room like an echo that wouldn't fade. Her slippers were still by the couch. Her reading glasses rested on the side table. I sat in her chair and stared at nothing until morning light pushed through the curtains. And then there was a knock. The morning after. They arrived together. All 3 of them. No warning call, no "how are you holding up, Dad?" Just a knock. Mark carried a folder. That should have told me everything. "We need to talk," he said, already stepping inside. I made coffee out of habit. Margaret always insisted difficult conversations required coffee. We sat in the living room. "Our concern," Susan began carefully, "is that you can't stay here alone." Her tone was rehearsed. Daniel avoided eye contact. Mark opened the folder. "The market is strong right now. The house could sell quickly. You'd make a solid return. We've looked into some retirement communities, clean, safe, social." Retirement communities. Like I was an old appliance ready to be relocated. "We could split the equity," Mark added casually. "It just makes sense." Split the equity. The words felt heavier than the coffin had. Your mother was buried yesterday, I said quietly. Mark sighed. That's emotional thinking, Dad. We're being practical. Practical. I looked around the room Margaret had painted herself. At the dent in the wall from when Daniel practiced pitching indoors. At the photo above the fireplace from our 25th anniversary. Practical had nothing to do with it. This wasn't about my loneliness. It was about their opportunity. The envelope. What they didn't know was that Margaret prepared for storms. 2 years earlier, after her diagnosis, we had met with a lawyer, quietly, privately. She insisted. If grief makes people forget who they are, she said, I want something in place to remind them. The house was placed in a trust. And there was a clause. If any child attempted to pressure or force a sale within 1 year of either parent's passing, their inheritance would be significantly reduced. Most of it would be redirected to a community housing charity she loved. She called it a mirror. So they can see themselves clearly, she had said. Now I walked to the cabinet and pulled out the envelope. Mark read it first. His face tightened. Susan grabbed it next. Daniel leaned over her shoulder. This can't be legal, Mark muttered. It is, I said calmly. So you're choosing a charity over your own children, Susan snapped. No, I replied gently. Your mother chose integrity over greed. The silence that followed was louder than any storm. Cracks in the surface. Mark stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. He left without another word. Susan followed, anger masking something deeper, fear perhaps. Daniel lingered. I didn't know he arranged the realtor, he said softly. I looked at him, the boy who once cried because a bird fell from its nest in our yard. You're still my son, I told him. His eyes filled. I miss Mom. So do I. He hugged me then. It wasn't long. But it was real. Rebuilding. The months after were slow. Mark stayed distant. Susan sent polite messages. Daniel visited occasionally. But something inside me shifted. Instead of shrinking into loneliness, I began volunteering at the housing charity Margaret loved. I fixed broken steps, patched drywall, repaired leaking roofs. I built things again. And every nail I hammered felt like a conversation with her. One afternoon, Daniel showed up at the worksite. I thought you might need help, he said. We worked side by side in quiet understanding. Eventually, he spoke. I was wrong, he admitted. I let money make decisions I shouldn't have. Growth is rarely loud. It happens in small, honest sentences. Susan came next, tearful, ashamed, vulnerable. She admitted she had been afraid of instability, of change, of watching her father age. Mark took nearly a year. When he finally came, rain was falling again. He stood at the door, older somehow. I handled it badly, he said. I was thinking about numbers, not you. I studied him carefully. Sometimes forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about choosing what matters more. Come inside, I said. 1 year later. On the anniversary of Margaret's funeral, we stood together at her grave. All 4 of us. Rain fell gently again, as if keeping tradition. But this time, I wasn't alone. Mark placed his hand on my shoulder. Susan laid flowers. Daniel stood close beside me. I kept the house, I told them quietly, because love lived there. They nodded, not because of inheritance, but because they finally understood. The moral. Grief is a mirror. It doesn't change who we are, it reveals us. Loss will test character, money will tempt it, fear will challenge it. But love, real love, outlasts storms. I am Jake. I am 62 years old. I buried my wife in the rain. The next morning, My children came for my home. What they found instead was something far more valuable. A reminder that inheritance is not measured in dollars, but in dignity. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can leave your children is the chance to choose who they want to become when the rain begins to fall.